Have you ever heard a story so unbelievable, so drenched in irony, that it almost feels like fate itself set the stage? Well, buckle up, because what I'm about to tell you is not some Hollywood screenplay. This is a royal secret buried in silence for decades, until it clawed its way back into the light in the most shocking and symbolic way possible. And trust me, you'll want to stay with me through every second, because what was uncovered not only rattles Buckingham Palace, but also resurrects the one voice they thought they had silenced forever, Diana's. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because this story, it's the kind of revelation that the palace would rather you never hear. It all began with something laughably ordinary. A routine maintenance check at Camilla's private estate, workers moving quietly through corridors, tapping on walls, checking for cracks, noting down leaks. Nothing that screamed world-shattering discovery, but sometimes the ordinary masks the extraordinary. One worker, surveying the bedroom of Tom Parker Bowles, Camilla's eldest son, noticed a faint, almost invisible line beneath plasterwork. At first, it looked like nothing more than the age, but the sound when he knocked told another story. Hollow. Too hollow. This wasn't brick. This wasn't stone. It was hiding something. And let me ask you this. In estates tied to centuries of scandal and secrecy, what do hollow walls usually mean? Passageways, chambers, or the kind of secrets you bury because you never want them found. Palace security was summoned within minutes. The air in that room turned thick, suffocating, because everyone realized this wasn't routine anymore. It was excavation. And with each strike of the chisel, plaster cracked like the drumbeat of history itself, until finally the wall gave way. Behind it, a suffocating corridor, narrow and stifling, choked with dust that hadn't seen light in decades. This wasn't a passage meant for escape or safety. No, this was concealment. This was silence carved into stone. And at the end of that suffocating crawl space, an iron-bound chest, heavy and deliberate, waiting like a sentinel in the shadows. Now, you tell me, what does a chest hidden behind layers of plaster and secrecy mean inside a royal estate? Treasure? Jewels? Lost heirlooms? That's what the workers thought too. But the reality? Far more explosive. The chest was dragged out, heavy with intent. The lock still clung on, corroded but unbroken. When it was finally forced open, the room froze. No gold, no crowns, no artifacts of pomp. Instead, papers, bundled with faded ribbons, parchment yellowed by time, harmless at first glance. But then, the handwriting, the unmistakable script. And that's when the blood drained from every face in the room. It was her, Diana. These weren't speeches, nor carefully crafted statements for the cameras. No, these were raw journals, personal confessions, the unfiltered voice of a woman who had been trapped inside the gilded cage of monarchy, and feared her truth would never survive. Let that sink in for a moment. Princess Diana, whose life was defined by being silenced, by being reshaped and mythologized, had left behind her unedited voice, and it had been deliberately hidden behind the wall of the son of the woman who replaced her. Fate doesn't get more savage than that. And make no mistake, these pages weren't polite diary entries. They were brutal, honest, pages dripping with loneliness, anger, and fear. She wrote about nights when she felt invisible inside palaces filled with people. She raged about the machinery of the crown, which could spin her life into narrative while ignoring her pain. And perhaps most haunting, she feared her legacy would be rewritten, softened into fairy tales, until the real Diana was erased. And now, here were her words, dug up decades later, ready to speak louder than any palace press release. You want to know irony? The man whose bedroom concealed this treasure trove, Tom Parker Bowles, is not a royal prince, not a titled lord. He's a writer, a journalist, a man whose entire life has revolved around words. Fate didn't drop these journals in William's lap, nor in Harry's. It placed them in the room of Camilla's son, a storyteller by trade, almost as if destiny itself demanded Diana's unfiltered truth to land in the hands of someone who could give it life. Now, pause. Let's imagine you're Charles. You've spent decades trying to stabilise your reign, to carefully balance your past with Camilla against the memory of Diana. And then, one day, out of nowhere, workers stumble on your late wife's secret journals, in your current wife's estate, in her son's bedroom wall. You can't script irony darker than that. The panic spread through palace walls like wildfire, courtiers whispering, "Do we destroy them? Do we lock them away? Or, God forbid, does the world see them?" Lawyers were consulted immediately. Who owned them? The monarchy? Diana's sons? Could they be kept for historical record under the Crown's control? The problem was this. Unlike rumours or tabloids, these weren't second-hand stories. These were Diana's words. Unarguable, unspinnable. Truth inked in her own hand. Now, think about William and Harry. For them, this wasn't about politics or monarchy. This was their mother. Imagine reading her most unguarded fears, decades after her death, written in the intimacy of solitude. For William, the heir, he saw danger. He knew the press would shred these pages, sensationalise them, and strip them of dignity. He leaned toward caution, toward protection. Harry? Different story. He was livid. To him, the very fact these writings had been hidden in Camilla's son's room felt like betrayal. Proof that Diana's voice had been buried deliberately. He demanded openness, transparency. Let the world hear her truth, unfiltered the way she intended. And here's the tragedy. Two brothers united by grief, split by instinct. William, cautious, Harry, defiant. A dynamic we've seen play out before, but this time with their mother's voice as the battleground, and the palace, they were trapped. Because for decades, Diana has been remembered as an icon, a humanitarian, a people's princess. But these writings revealed the woman behind the icon, the raw human, the struggles, the anger, the fear, and that's far more dangerous to the monarchy than any scandal, because it makes her real, too real. And so the question becomes, what happens now? Can you lock away a voice that refuses to be silenced? Or has Diana, even in death, found a way to speak again, shaking the monarchy in ways it never expected? Stick with me, because in part 2, we'll dive into the fallout, the panic, the split between William and Harry, the unbearable irony for Charles, and the way Diana's words, her real words, threatened to rewrite her legacy and maybe even the monarchy itself. And if you've made it this far, smash that like button, because stories like this, the palace doesn't want you to hear them. Comment down below. If these journals exist, should they be released? Or should they remain buried? I want to know what you think. So, the chest is open, the words are out, and the monarchy is cornered. What do you do when the ghost you've spent decades trying to control suddenly returns, louder, sharper, and utterly undeniable? That's the nightmare Buckingham Palace now faces. Because Diana's words weren't meant for history books or museum displays. They were raw, private confessions, and they expose a truth the Crown has always feared, that behind the glittering ceremonies, behind the gilded carriages, lies a machine that silences more than it protects. And here's the brutal irony. These weren't discovered in some forgotten royal archive or an old safe in Kensington Palace. Number They were hidden inside Camilla's son's bedroom wall. Let that sink in. Diana's silenced voice, buried in the sanctuary of the woman blamed for her downfall. You can't invent symbolism darker than this. Inside the palace, whispers erupted into panic. For Charles, it wasn't just a political crisis. It was personal. Imagine being king and finding your late wife's secret journals inside your current wife's home. It's the past punching through the walls of your present, demanding attention. For years, Charles has worked to polish his reign, to soften Camilla's image, to bury the triangle that defined his first marriage. And yet, here it was, alive again, in ink and ribbon, clawing its way back from the shadows. The courtiers, the lawyers, the PR machinery. They scrambled. Could they claim the writings belonged to William and Harry? Could they be sealed as private property under palace control? Or worse, should they be destroyed outright to prevent a scandal that could spiral beyond control? The problem is, destruction carries risk. Once people know something exists, erasing it only fuels suspicion. And if there's one thing the monarchy can't afford, it's suspicion turning into outrage. Now let's talk about William. As heir to the throne, his instinct was simple. Protect the crown. Protect stability. He knew what these pages represented. The tabloids would rip them apart. Diana's pain would be headline fodder stripped of dignity. For William, restraint wasn't cowardice. It was protection. But let's be honest, to the public, it would look like censorship. The monarchy silencing Diana yet again. Harry, the complete opposite. Freed from the machinery of the palace, Harry saw these writings as vindication, proof of what Diana had always feared, that her voice would be buried, her truth rewritten. For Harry, hiding the journals would be betrayal. He demanded transparency, that the world see his mother as she really was, unguarded, emotional, and real. And that's the clash. The brother bound by duty versus the brother bound by rebellion. Both driven by love for the same woman, but pulling in opposite directions. And here's the question for you watching. If Diana's journals were yours to decide, would you release them to the world, unedited, unfiltered? Or would you guard them, even if it meant silencing her voice once again? Comment below. I want to hear your take, because this debate cuts straight to the heart of Diana's legacy. Now, back to the palace. This wasn't just about William and Harry. For Charles, the discovery was agony, because those pages weren't polite. They weren't flattering. They revealed a Diana who felt invisible, who feared her life would be rewritten by the very man who now wears the crown. And now, thanks to fate's cruel irony, those words were unearthed not in her son's homes, but in Camilla's. To Charles, it was like history itself had conspired to humiliate him. The monarchy has faced scandals before, affairs, abandonments, even abdications. But those scandals were survivable, because they could be spun, denied, or drowned out. Diana's words? Not so simple. These were in her own hand. No spin, no filter. Truth in ink. And the monarchy knows. Truth is far harder to control than rumour. The palace strategists understood immediately. This wasn't just about reputation. It was about survival. Because Diana wasn't just a princess. She was, and remains, the people's princess. Her memory has outlived every headline, every scandal. She is untouchable in the court of public opinion. And if her raw, private writings went public, they wouldn't just dent the monarchy. They could shatter it. So, what's the move? Some say the crown will try to quietly absorb the journals, classify them as historical artifacts, and bury them in the royal archives, locked away until long after everyone alive today is gone. Others believe William will try to protect them, keeping them as private heirlooms for him and Harry, never to be published. But Harry? If history tells us anything, it's that he won't stay silent. He'll fight to release them. And if he does, the monarchy faces a reckoning bigger than any Oprah interview or Netflix series ever could. Because these writings don't just tell Diana's story, they reshape her legacy. For decades, the palace has controlled the narrative. Diana as the tragic beauty, the humanitarian, the saint. But these journals reveal something far more dangerous. Diana as human, vulnerable, angry, afraid, and in many ways that makes her more powerful than ever. Think about it. The monarchy thrives on myth, on perfection, ritual, and image. But Diana's words rip away the veil. They remind the world that behind the fairy tale lies loneliness, manipulation, and fear. And once people see that truth, can they ever look at the crown the same way again? And maybe that's the final irony. Diana once feared her voice would vanish, erased by the crown. Instead, decades later, her voice has returned, louder, clearer, and unstoppable. And it didn't come from archives, or museums, or speeches. It came from behind the wall of the woman who replaced her. Almost as if fate itself refused to let her be silenced. So, where does this leave the monarchy? Teetering. Because no matter what choice they make, bury the journals or release them, the damage is done. The world knows they exist. The question now is not whether Diana will be heard. It's when. And how loud. And I'll leave you with this. The crown has always relied on silence, on secrets buried behind walls, both literal and metaphorical. But walls crack, secrets slip. And sometimes, when history wants to be heard, it finds a way. Diana's words have done just that. And the monarchy, no matter how powerful, cannot silence her twice. So what do you think? Should the monarchy come clean, release the journals, and face the fallout? Or will they bury them again, hoping time will do their work for them? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear from you. And if you're still here, you clearly care about the truth the palace doesn't want told. Smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss part 3 of this unfolding saga. Because trust me, this isn't over. Not by a long shot.